Seán's story.
18,898. That's the number of asylum seekers presumed drowned in the Mediterranean since 2014. The violence unraveling societies and uprooting families across the world have caused millions to seek asylum. Europe's image as a human rights champion has been put to the test, and Europe's limited humanitarian response to this crisis has made the Mediterranean Sea one of the deadliest. This is a time when we Europeans, who make claims of being a force for peace, need to come together to find peaceful means of solving global challenges and conflicts. But what has our response been? Securing our border against those who are most in need. The European Union is the most polarised it has ever been. This is driven in large part by far-right and nationalist parties that are securing an increasing number of parliamentary seats. These once marginalised and extreme voices have been strengthened by three growing fears: cultural liberalisation, mass immigration, and the perceived abandonment of national sovereignty. And these fears have shaped Europe's response to the most vulnerable who flee war, environmental catastrophe, and persecution. But each time we outsource our border control infrastructure to countries with poor human rights records like Libya, or provide resources to build detention centres where people experience rape and torture, we put another brick into Fortress Europe and deny those escaping violence their right to safety, and often their right to life. Rights we deny even as we claim to uphold them. And this is made possible because we let fears and distrust determine our response to one of the most severe humanitarian crises to befall Europe. As a first responder with maritime search and rescue training, I flew to the Greek island of Lesbos, which has been the entry point for over 500,000 asylum seekers. I coordinated civilian search and rescue efforts for nearly 1 year with a team of medics and boat crews who could respond to emergencies both on land and at sea. And our team assisted 50,000 asylum seekers. For many, providing little more than a smile and a blanket is enough. Remember, asylum seekers are survivors, not merely victims. However, some also needed immediate medical care. One particularly frightening night, still on my mind, happened in a cold winter night. We had assisted a dinghy of 86 people. We responded to that dinghy, and it was designed for 20. It was packed with 86, over 20 children, many without life jackets. I remember we had assisted 85 people off the dinghy, and I was doing one last check. And I had nearly missed a man who had gone into hypothermic shock and was lying completely still at the base of the boat, almost covered by water. Though he was revived, many, many are not. And despite the humanitarian nature of our voluntary work, my colleagues Sarah, Nassas, and I were arrested. This time last year I was in prison. I spent 3.5 months behind bars until eventually being released on bail. What crimes am I accused of? The most outrageous are smuggling, money laundering, being part of a criminal organization, and even espionage or spying. We still await trial. And if we're found guilty, our sentence will span into the coming centuries for what experts say is the criminalization of saving lives. In fact, there have been nearly 50 prosecutions against 158 humanitarians across Europe since the beginning of the crisis in 2014. And these prosecutions happen because we let our fear-driven and polarized politics demonize the most vulnerable. The far-right claim that we must secure our borders in defense of European values of peace and of justice. The irony, of course, is that when we criminalize help and abandon people to drown, we have already lost these values of peace and of justice. We must reject racism and misinformation, but we must also reach out to those who may be swayed by it. Even in a polarized world, it doesn't matter if you're on the right or the left. Nobody should be abandoned to die. Help is not a crime, but nor is it heroic. It is the human thing to do and the necessary thing to do.